welcome back, everybody. How's it going, Steven?
Good. How you doing today?
Yeah, can't really complain, but as the cliche goes, nobody would listen anyway. So,
Nobody listens.
so I was thinking about kind of what we want to talk about today, and kind of some of our previous conversations. I thought it might be a good idea to talk about character and why that's so important. It kind of came into my mind because a few weeks ago I was asked really to give a talk to some high school kids about the importance of character and integrity and all that. It kind of got some of the juices going, thinking of why that's something maybe we should talk about here. So does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, it is a kind of a hot topic that a lot of people forget. They get kind of sidetracked by the flashy objects that are around, so they always forget to really kind of go with that gut feeling of somebody's character in there. So I think that's a good topic for us today.
Yeah. I think especially in a kind of like an industry like what you do as a mortgage loan originator, there's so many people that are maybe the products aren't that different. What's offered, there's of course some differences. Some places are better than others just objectively versus what they're offering. But a lot of times it's more the intangible stuff that really makes the difference between working with one person or another. So I wanted to kind of ask you a few questions, if that's okay,
Yeah.
kind of going forward with this stuff. Now, this is one thing I'm not entirely sure about, but I know, like in my world, I'm a fiduciary, which means, in layman's terms, I'm really legally obliged to put my client's interests in front of my own personal or business interests. So it's kind of a little more beyond just an esoteric, ooh, it's, you have good character. Like I'm violating a legal obligation if I'm not acting in a fiduciary capacity. But with what you do you guys do stuff like that? Are you?
We are a fiduciary. Most of the time when you think about that is people are like, okay, they're getting paid differently on different products they might sell, and that's really not the case with us, but it's still getting the client's best interest of what is the best thing for them, kind of thing. I mean, even if it's, we like to tell people like, okay, you don't want to be house broke, you don't want to get a mortgage payment, though you can get as high as your budget, or not even budget, but what will the government will allow, but really your budget's $500-600 or $500-600 less a month. So you
Mhm.
kind of, your their best interest is to stay around that point, and that's what you're trying to drive them to. Though yes, they could go higher, and we would technically, make pennies on the dollar over the loan, but not, kind of screwing that person over in the short term when they do get that house.
Right. So the advice you're providing to people is in their best interest. It's like you said, you would make maybe a little more money if they got the highest amount that they were
Yeah.
pre-approved for, but they would be nuking themselves potentially financially
Yes,
if they
exactly.
did that.
People
So
don't people just don't realize that too when we're doing it is like when we run what your debt to income ratio is going to be, it's what's on your credit report and then what's the mortgage payment. So it doesn't include, your electric, your water, cell phone bills. Those aren't on your credit report. So those items don't count on there. So you could easily start racking up stuff that would put you in a financial hardship by buying a home that quickly, not staying within your
mhm.
budget.
Now is every mortgage LO fiduciary out there?
I don't legally know that one. I'm gonna double check on that one. You would assume, but how we me and you have talked, technically they are most financial advisors fiduciary or quote
Yeah,
unquote
that's
supposed to be.
No, that's a good question. So actually, no, not all people that call themselves financial advisors are fiduciaries. It really depends on how they're licensed and among other things. And also stuff I've talked about in the past, there's not a ton of regulation in titling out there for people in the financial advice industry. So I call myself a financial planner. I'm a certified financial planner. It's the thing I tend to focus on, and I just try to keep it simple. But there's a lot of different terms out there like wealth manager, financial counselor, a whole bunch of other things, but really financial advisor is the most used term. And you see a lot of people out there that call themselves financial advisors that are really kind of just product salespeople. So the advice that they give, they don't have to necessarily have your best interest at heart. So if they're saying, hey, go ahead and buy this X, Y, or Z product or this policy over here, they might be giving that advice because that's how they get paid. So, and they also aren't necessarily operating in a fiduciary capacity. And they know that too. You can't say you're a fiduciary when you're not. It's not just some wishy-washy marketing term. There is an actual legal obligation to it, at least in my world. But at the same time, it is kind of the same thing, that really it should be the lowest common denominator. And this is kind of the next thing I wanted to get into talking about. There's a lot of people out there that are fiduciaries, but this is kind of my own personal biases, maybe speaking, where I think if you're working with anybody, yeah, you got your lights there. Did they fix?
One day.
One
Jeez.
day they're going to work out.
One day. You're talking too long, so I wasn't moving enough. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
you were riveted by what it was saying. I know. But kind of getting back to what I was saying, there's so many people out there that are fiduciary, but also in my mind, it should be the lowest bar that you set for if you're somebody wanting to work with a professional, either it be like in my world in finance or in the real estate sector or in the legal sector. Working with a fiduciary should be the lowest standard that you should accept, I think, as a client. So it doesn't really do a good job in helping you, if you're looking to work with a professional, differentiate folks. So I think outside of fiduciary, the thing you really want to look at is character, but that's a lot harder to figure out. So I think that'd be a good thing for us to kind of talk about, is why is working with somebody who has good character? What even is that? So like, Stephen, if I asked you, like, what does character mean to you?
Man, it is tough when you think about it. I mean, you go to the definition of fiduciary, like they're legally obligated to have your best interest, but doesn't, I mean, they can still be, I guess, technically a bad character. I always tell people, like, it's a gut feeling. You kind of feel something with somebody where you're just like, okay, they're doing right, they have integrity, when nobody's watching, you can always tell that whatever they're putting their heart into is coming up well. And I see it a lot in my world. A lot of lenders that will go out there and they will help realtors buy leads, kind of thing.
Oh, they help realtors buy leads.
So they'll buy leads for them, split the cost, whatever the case is. Well, what's happening then is in that realtor is almost forced to send every lead that they're getting, of course, because the person's buying them back to them. Kind of thing. So they're kind of strong arming them to that, hey, over to this person, which can, in a sense, backfire. I mean, I always say, like, okay, anybody can buy your lead. Doesn't mean they're good at their job. Doesn't mean, they're going to actually take care of the client, because if you're taking care of the client, it's going to pay dividends in the long run. So if you have good character, not just, hey, here's your mortgage plan and here's whatever kind of thing, but actually diving deep, what we call almost like well prospecting, is where you're diving deep.
I'm sorry, what did you say it was called? Well prospecting?
Well prospecting.
Interesting.
Like a water well.
Oh, okay.
So diving deeper into it, we have what's called swamp prospecting and well prospecting. So swamp prospecting, low level water, goes all the way around, nothing bad with that, and then there's well prospecting, is where you're diving deeper into it. So that's where your character really comes into play. I tell people just kind of all the time, if your gut feeling is telling you no, then it's better just to walk away.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I tried to define, when you're trying to define character, like what it means. I tried to pull it out of like the high school students I mentioned I was talking to a few weeks ago. And just the simple definition I came up with it is just like doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Like that's just the simplest way I can try to describe it. Of course, then you start peeling back the onion a little bit. It's like, okay, we'll define the right thing. And you start getting into morals and ethics and all that. And it's a much deeper question if you really start peeling it back. But I think the way you kind of succinctly described it is kind of go with your gut. If the person seems like a good person, then maybe they are. That doesn't mean people can't swindle you. That's not what I mean. But if you get a bad feeling, that's usually something you don't want to ignore.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really
that little blinking red light comes on. You might want to walk away from the situation.
Yeah. Kind of thing. And I think we've all got that kind of inherent BS detector, if you will, that you're like, wait, something the person's telling me maybe sounds a little too good to be true. Like I can't put my finger on it exactly because maybe I'm not an expert in that field, or I'm not as educated as this person is, or they're really good with their sales script in convincing people, but something just feels off. So definitely don't ignore that feeling. Yeah, I would say for folks, if you're deciding you want to work with somebody, we're talking about character. So one thing I used when I was talking to the high school kids is kind of a little thing. So I'll treat you like a high schooler here, Stephen.
Oh, thank you.
So I asked you, like, who's your favorite superhero?
Captain America.
Captain America. What now? Why would that be?
Oh, who knows?
So it's funny. So that actually does go into the same point I'm going to mention. And the kids kind of caught into this too. So the story I shared with them is, hey, when I was a kid, I really liked Batman. Like he was super cool. He was edgy. He had all these cool little gadgets. And I asked the kids what's
That's because we grew
Batman's
up in the
superpower.
90s, though.
Well, that's true. Also,
That's all the Batman movies came out.
Batman and all that. That was great. But you ask the kids, like, what was Batman's superpower? And of course, some of these kids like, he's rich. I'm like, yeah, that's not really what we're getting at here. But yeah, that definitely helps him do what he's doing.
Yeah.
But they kind of came up with his intelligence, stuff like that. And then I asked them, okay, as I got older, I kind of changed who my favorite superhero was. And I asked them to guess. So what would you guess? I used to like Batman when I was a kid, and I've gotten older and maybe more boring. Who do you think my favorite superhero is these days? Did you say Wonder Woman?
No. I would. Now I'm going to do that. Wonder Woman. Oh, man. Favorite superhero now for you? Superman. I'm just going to go with Superman.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, look at that.
So it's funny. You mentioned
I know
Captain
your
America.
character without knowing the definition of character.
Right. Doing the right thing. So that's like when I asked the kids, I told them, well, actually it's Superman. And one of the kids guessed Captain America. I don't know, maybe our backgrounds are similar, so that's why he thought the same thing. And I was like, you know what? That's not it, but you're going the right direction. Because the Captain America stuff, similar reasons. So, what I was telling him was, Superman's power, he's basically a god, right? He's like, hey, I can pretty much do what I want. If I want to punch the planet into the sun, I could probably do that. If I want to just rule everywhere with an iron fist, I could do that. That's not really his power, though. His power is character. Because he's got all that endless supply of like ability, basically, where he could impose his will on anybody. And what he really just tries to do day in and day out is just be a good person, help people out that are weaker than him or maybe less able than him. So that was what I was trying to kind of drive home. Like as I've gotten older, definitely I've learned to appreciate character and integrity and just doing the right thing so much more. And I think if you're looking to work with somebody, especially like working with somebody like in your world, Stephen, where like, hey, I need someone to help advise me on getting a mortgage, which is going to be most people's, like the vast majority of people's biggest debt on their biggest, most important purchase of their entire life. Like you want to work with somebody who has like impeccable character and good service. So
exactly, because it definitely does come down more than just numbers. Anybody can throw the numbers at you and run the what's the rate and what's the cost and all of that. And then it comes down to is when you eventually have choices to make, like, hey, do I buy down my rate? Do I do this? Do I do, X, Y, and Z? And now you're kind of going, I like to present everything to somebody and then kind of go back with it and say, okay, this is kind of what I would do. And here's why, but it's still their personal choice. But at least they know they're getting all the information, which is in my industry, that's where people are swindled. They don't get the full clear picture of everything.
So what would be something that you see left off a lot that kind of muddies the waters?
So when the refi boom was happening, so let's just say, 2020, 2021, a lot of people were refining for that lower rate kind of situation, lower their payment. What we were seeing a lot of times is when you're refining, you're not doing if you're doing cash out refi, but it's a lot of those numbers are baked back into the loan. So you basically are not coming to the closing table with anything. The fees were being charged like crazy on that. So people were missing that because they were just focusing on the mortgage payment kind of thing. Like I actually had somebody where they came in and they were rate conscious. So they were looking at this rate that was, I think it was at the time about a quarter of a point less than mine. But then when you actually read into everything with it, it showed to be, I think that it was roughly like $3-4 grand in fees, additional fees. So when you actually balance the two out, even though if I was higher than that rate, my my overall fees and overall cost of the whole loan was way cheaper.
Right.
And that's what people just they don't always understand it. They just look at, okay, we know they're focused on the rate, so we're going to show them the rate. They're focused on the payment, we're going to show them the payment, but you don't look at all the additional fees that's going into it that they could be adding on that, okay, now your costs are building up and you just don't realize, especially if it's your first home kind of thing. Even if it's your second or third, you've only done it once, twice, three times, when we've done it, hundreds of times. This is what we do all the time, so that you just don't know what to look for. So having character on that really is a big thing. I like, me and you both produce a lot of social media videos, and it's very easy, to find people out there that are going to swindle you.
Yeah, tell me about
it. We produce our videos either to kind of call them out or to just basically say, like, no, this is the truth, and this is what's really actually happening. Like, you can ask these questions, and here's the red flags for this or that. Like, if you're seeing them, be cautious, kind of thing.
Yeah, because most people don't understand the intricacies of these complex types of financial documents, or like a mortgage statement. If you're looking at stuff saying, all right, here's how it lays out everything that you're going to be paying, while, in your industry, I know you're required to disclose all that stuff, but there's ways to disclose things that are not really disclosing things.
True.
And, like you said,
and
it's
if
all
there's
on
a change,
sheet.
if I change the stuff and there's a compliance issue, I have to redisclose. So if I'm just redisclosing to you, because people are like, it's a built-in thing. So if there's a big change, you have to give a reason why you're changing it, whatever the case may be. But to the consumer, they're just signing the redisclosure again. So the fees could go up, or I've seen fees move around in certain places where they've overestimated a certain section, and then they're not showing a true value that's supposed to be there, because it's run by the county or whatever, so it's supposed to be a lot less, and then they move that fee over to where the mortgage company is going to be collecting most of that fee and gaining money on it, where that doesn't have to be there, kind of thing. Right. But that cash to close at the bottom is still the same, so that's what the consumer is looking at instead of all the details.
Right. There's ways to manipulate the numbers, and if you're working with people that don't exactly have a shining character, yeah, they're acting like they're helping you out, but in reality, they're lining their own pockets. And there's nothing wrong with making money. Everybody's running a business, but there's ways to do it that are moral and ethical, that are showing you're doing it with good character and integrity, and not just trying to fleece people left and right. Yep. And we all know there's a lot of people out there like that, maybe more than we'd really care to admit.
Exactly. I mean, and I think there are, people that do have good character, but have been taught to sell a certain product, and they don't realize what they're doing half the time.
Yeah, that was kind of the final point I wanted to touch on with you, is like, I'm a big believer in how things are set up kind of drive the behavior of folks within a system. So if you have a business, and it's one of the reasons I set up my business compensation structure and the way we get paid the way I did, is if you have a business that gets basically all its revenue off of selling a certain product or having people do a specific thing, then even if you have great character and integrity, it's sometimes going to be hard to keep people doing the thing that's in their best interest, as opposed to what helps you put food on the table at the end of the day. So if you're working at a firm, let's say in my world, that tends to sell a certain product, and that's like their bread and butter, and you have people coming to you for overarching, comprehensive financial advice, no matter how much you might want to try to help people out, and that's like, you really have a good heart and you're trying to help, there's going to always be a part in the back of your brain that goes, yeah, if they do this kind of boring thing that's maybe in their best interest, it's going to be in their best interest, and I'll get paid a little something. But if they do this flashier, cooler thing that looks good on paper, I get paid a heck of a lot more, and it's maybe not in their best interest to do that. So that tension, a lot of times, even when there's good character in the people you're talking to, it can sometimes muddy the waters a bit there too. And that's why also, not just working with people that have good character, but also organizations, I think, that are set up in a ethical, moral way, are the places you really want to work with folks, those people that inhabit those types of systems. And I know you see that too. Like there's certain products that are offered that pay substantially more than just a normal, boring 30-year fixed mortgage, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at reverse mortgages, I mean, that's the only one we actually get paid differently on. I mean, and it's a lot of work, part of it, but it's though I would say 99% of the time does not make sense for people. There are people that makes sense for because it's really meant for your last I won't say hurrah, but like your last ditch effort of like, hey, I need to get money out or I need to be paid for something because I own this house. I've owned it for 30, 40 years or whatever the case is. I have so much equity. I need it to pay me. My kids are good. They don't need the house anymore. That's when you kind of use it. But, you almost like a savings account that you finally can tap kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the big kind of example I can think of from my previous life when I worked at a larger firm was I was life insurance licensed. So I could sell, life insurance and annuities. I was able to do that. I only did a handful of those when I was there, and they were really only replacing somebody's old policy they were either paying crazy fees or updating something that was decades old into something more modern with less fees and maybe made more sense in their current situation. But every time I did that, I was always trying to do the right thing by my clients, be a fiduciary, and not look at anything like compensation. But the first time I did that, and you're looking at what I would be making off of just that simple like 1031 exchange, or I'm sorry, 1035. I'm getting all my stuff mixed up.
Yeah. On the real estate route.
1035. your exchange from one insurance side policy to another, or one annuity to another, you're like, dang, you're getting a certain percent of the entire transaction. And when you're looking at transactions that are $2, $3, $4, $500,000, and you're earning 3 or 4% of that just for basically doing some paperwork, that's all the extra work you're really doing there. I mean, it made sense for those people, but I can see how over time that little, not so little, maybe dollar figure would be in the back of your head going, if you have somebody else do something like this, you can make $10,000 just from doing this one little thing. So over time, that type of thing can really eat at people's character and integrity bit by bit. So that's one reason when I went off on my own and started my firm, I was like, all right, life insurance license, bye-bye. Like, we're throwing that away. Product sales, Series 7 license, bye-bye. We're throwing that away. The only people paying me are my clients. That is the only person I'm accepting any sort of fee from. So like, we're not doing referral fees. We're not doing any sort of product sale fees. Bye-bye. Because I can see how over time that could potentially eat in to my integrity. And I could be giving people advice that maybe it isn't bad, but isn't in their best interest.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
So that's how I thought about it, at least.
Yeah. So, kind of wrapping things up, I think the best thing is, that with character, no matter what people are in, it's just that, gut feeling that you have with them kind of thing. Are they really giving me their best interest? And at any time you feel they're not, I mean, that's your time to, just because a red flag comes up doesn't mean it's actually, I don't want to say justified because it did come up and actually means anything significant, but it is a time for you to step back and be like, okay, let me look at everything with this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, my personal philosophy too is even if you're like, hey, this person's great, I love them, they give me a really good vibe, talk to a few other people too. If you're looking to work with a professional in some capacity, it never hurts to get a couple different opinions, and then you at least have some different people to look at and then compare each other to a few good options. So
exactly.
Then you can pick the one that you get the best feeling with, or the one that you think is best for you. So that's my 2 cents on it. Yeah. So good talk, Stephen. I really appreciate this, and I hope everybody out there got a little something out of this. So we'll keep driving on in the future, hopefully giving you all some information you wish you knew earlier. So say bye to everybody, Stephen.
Adios.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.